When the man passed by his neighbor's sheep pen, he unexpectedly discovered a hidden spring well beneath the ground. Yet he kept the secret and instead said he wanted to buy 2 sheep to treat a classmate from the police station. The other man immediately became interested after hearing this. Seeing that the bait had worked, the young man casually mentioned that sheep had been disappearing in the village lately. That old classmate had actually come to investigate the case in secret. The man instantly panicked and did not know what to do, because all the sheep he had stolen before were slaughtered inside his own sheep pen. The wool and the bells had already been buried deep underground. If the investigation followed the clues back to him, everything would be over. So he quickly came up with a vicious plan to frame someone else. He demanded that the young man give him $200, and he would sell both the sheep and the sheep pen together. The two of them then wrote a simple agreement and completed the deal. That very night, the young man called his childhood friend to dig the well together. After an exhausting night of digging, they finally brought up clear fresh water. In those dry years, water was an extremely precious resource. The young man immediately began selling cool well water beside the road. At that time, it was the dry season and the whole country was desperately short of water, so he sold each bowl of water for $2. Before long, he earned the first bucket of gold in his life just by selling water. Yet he did not rush to enjoy it and instead hurried straight back home, facing the wealthy girlfriend's demand that he marry into her family. He refused without the slightest hesitation. He willingly gave up the luxurious life that was within easy reach, because only by doing this could he save his own life. In his previous life, he had abandoned his mother and younger sister to marry into his girlfriend's family. He worked desperately for his wife's powerful company for many long years and finally helped it go public. But he himself was left with a body full of serious illnesses from exhaustion. When he was critically ill, his wife suddenly handed him a divorce agreement and forced him to leave with nothing. To make him sign, she even revealed a shocking secret. It turned out she had long known that he married into her family only to repay a debt of gratitude. Yet the young man had mistakenly believed that his wife was the girl who secretly paid his school tuition many years ago, and the one who stayed beside his hospital bed day and night as his first love. Only then did he finally realize how terribly wrong he had been. At the moment of his dying breath, he finally saw the girl he owed the most in this lifetime. Sadly, by then everything was already far too late. Unexpectedly, in the next instant, he was reborn and returned to many years earlier, and today happened to be the very day of his wedding. In his previous life, he had been blind and foolish and chose to become alive and son-in-law. He devoted many painful years of his life to them, yet ended up with such a tragic fate. Now that fate had given him another chance, he would never repeat the same mistake. At that moment, his fiancée was in the living room complaining that the house was dirty and broken. She even mocked the young man's sister in front of everyone for dressing so poorly. His sister angrily waved a feather duster and shouted that her brother would never become their live-in son-in-law. Hearing the noise, the young man quickly walked out and separated the two. When he saw his sister again, his eyes instantly turned red. He remembered that in his previous life she accepted a cruel marriage just to get a bride price to pay for their mother's surgery. She worked like an exhausted animal and endured unimaginable abuse. In the end, she even died because of a difficult childbirth. The young man tried to hug his sister, but she quickly dodged away. She thought her brother was about to hit her again. Instead, he gently asked with concern whether she had been hurt. Then he turned his head and saw the woman's ugly and arrogant face. He immediately told her to get out of his house. The furious woman slammed the door and stormed away. Just then, his childhood friend rushed over and told him their mother had suddenly fainted while working in the fields. He hurried to the hospital only to be told that his mother's condition was extremely critical. She needed $200 for urgent treatment, but the brother and sister searched everywhere on their bodies and could only gather $100. At that moment, the scheming woman suddenly appeared again and urged him to marry her. As long as he agreed to become a live-in son-in-law, the $200 would be his immediately. The young man simply let out a cold and contemptuous laugh. He swore that even if he died poor, he would never marry into her family, and he would never take a single cent from her. But when he looked at his mother lying on the hospital bed, he felt as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Just then, the village suddenly announced that a once-in-a-century drought would strike this year. Drinking water would become extremely scarce. The young man suddenly thought of a clever way to make money, so he made a bet with the woman that he would earn $2,000 within 10 days. If he failed, he would immediately go to her house and become their live-in son-in-law. Now that the drought was causing severe water shortages, as long as he could find a place to dig a well, he could easily earn several $1,000s and solve his urgent problem. And he clearly remembered that in his previous life, the only well in the village was beneath the sheep pen, so he went straight to that house. Looking at this thug who had built his fortune by stealing sheep in his previous life, he felt deep contempt. Even worse, when the drought later arrived, the man monopolized the only well and forced the entire village to pay for water. To prevent this from happening again and also solve his own crisis, the young man stepped forward and pretended he wanted to buy 2 sheep to treat his old classmate. The other man heard that this poor live-in son-in-law was being so generous and immediately became interested. The young man deliberately looked around carefully. After confirming that no one was nearby, he lowered his voice and said that the classmate was actually a police officer. This time he had come to the village to investigate the stolen sheep case. The man instantly broke into a cold sweat after hearing this, so he quickly came up with an idea and said he was no longer planning to raise sheep and the pen was useless. As long as the young man paid $200, he would sell both the sheep and the sheep pen. But the young man worried that the man might regret it after the well was dug out, so he suggested signing an agreement. Unexpectedly, the man hurried to write a contract immediately, secretly feeling proud because he believed he had finally found a scapegoat. After signing the agreement, he left with a smug smile. Afterward, the young man went to his sister's fiancé's house and returned the 2 sheep that had been given as the bride price. Then, taking advantage of the night, he brought his childhood friend to the sheep pen to dig the well. However, after digging for an entire night, they still did not see a single drop of water. Even the villagers advised him not to waste his strength. After all, for so many years, no one in the village had ever dug a well with water, and even if water appeared, it was usually salty. Even after boiling, it could not be drunk. But in the very next moment, clear water suddenly burst out from the ground. However, the young man did not want to profit from the villagers' hard-earned money, so he decided to let everyone use the well for free. The furious thug immediately began cursing loudly, insisting that he must take back the sheep pen. Only when the young man showed the written agreement did he finally fall silent. The next day, the young man set up a small water stall beside the road. At first, passers-by heard that it cost $2 for a bowl and thought it was too expensive, so they walked away, until an extremely thirsty traveler picked up a bowl and drank it in one gulp. Only then did everyone rush forward to buy it. In this way, he quickly earned $200. But when he went to pay the hospital fee, he suddenly saw the girl who had been his true love in his previous life. Looking at this pure and lovely young woman in front of him, he could not help sighing at how blind and foolish he had been in his previous life. He rejected the gentle and caring girl, yet desperately tried to please the fierce and vicious woman. He secretly swore that he would work hard to make money. As long as he earned $10,000, he would go to the girl's house to propose marriage. However, before the peaceful days lasted long, that troublesome thug began causing trouble again. He fetched water from the young man's well and resold it, and he even sold it for half the price to deliberately steal his business. Just as his good brother could not bear it anymore and prepared to stand up for him, unexpectedly the young man directly stopped him, calmly saying that he had already thought of a way to deal with that man.